Hello, thank you for watching my overview of Fire and Rain by James Vernon Taylor. So to start, James Vernon Taylor, also known as James Taylor or JT or String Bean, was born into a wealthy family in Boston, Massachusetts. He was born on March 12th, 1948, and only lived there until he was about 3 when his family and him moved to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He started playing the guitar around age 12, so his years active were 66 officially until present day. He had 3 brothers and 1 sister, his most notable brother being Livingston Taylor, and the others not growing to be as big as James or Livingston. However, they were musically talented, and his mother studied the cello, so there was a family of musicians being brewed up here with James. It was in his teenage years, and he attended Milton Academy until he pulled himself out because of drugs and psychiatric problems. So he admitted himself into the McLean Psychiatric Hospital in Massachusetts, and right now this is year 1965. So this is where he developed his skills and got his career going, making the best out of what the current situation he had was. And then after leaving the hospital 1 year after, he helped form a band known as the Flying Machine, and things didn't work out well with them, blah 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 blah. They break up, and he gets inspired to move to London. So now here in London, he signs with the Beatles' Apple record label, and back then this is big because albums were everything, and more today it's like there's albums and we pick our favorite couple songs and add it to a playlist, but that's not as big as what it used to be. And then so his debut album with this new company was James Taylor. That's the name of the album, and it was rated well by the critics, but didn't sell well at all compared to what the ratings were. So then in 1969, Taylor returned to the U.S., but again he has a drug addiction, so he checked himself into another hospital, this one being in New York, and then he later found himself at the Austin Riggs Psychiatric facility in Massachusetts, where he was born. Later that year in 69, he bounced back sort of and played at the 1969 Newport Folk Festival, which was in Rhode Island. Moving on from here, he then moved to California and made a second album, this one being called Sweet Baby James, which holds the hit called Fire and Rain, which I will be analyzing later in this video. But this album is not with the Beatles' Apple record label, it's now with the Warner Brothers. Later on, he marries Carly Simon, which doesn't end up well, or his next 2 wives, which we'll talk about later. But then in 1977, he signs with Columbia Records. And then later that year, he always talks about this in interviews, and it's often brought up in songs and stuff, is his encounter with Mark David Chapman, who we know later killed John Lennon just 24 hours after him and James Taylor were talking. He says it's surreal to experience, I have a quote right here, it says, "It's surreal to have actually come in contact with the guy 24 hours before he shot John." And we see this often in his songs and whatnot, and that obviously has a huge impact on him to who he turned out to be. And then more times go on, blah blah blah. It's 1981 now, and Carly Simon and him end their marriage. And then while we're on it, marriages don't end well with him. He had 2 more, one being with Catherine Walker, and now he's currently with Carolyn Smedvig, which was in 2001. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the actual song, Fire and Rain. So at a glimpse, it's about James Taylor's reaction to his friend that committed suicide, named Susanna Schnurr, and his experiences with drugs and fame. So to start, there's a couple controversies about the meaning of this song, and James Taylor actually rejected the most popular one in his 1972 Rolling Stone interview. The story that's false is that James Taylor had a concert and his friends set up a plane ride for his girlfriend Suzanne, who later died in the plane crash on the way to the concert without James even knowing. And that is not true. The correct story is she just committed suicide. And we see that in his first verse right here. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. So yep, that's the first verse. And then we have the chorus come in, which is very important and amazing. So I'm going to play that as well. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again. Okay, so the theme or the chorus is usually the theme or the overall meaning. It sums it up in my opinion. It's sort of like a thesis for a song. So I've seen fire and I've seen rain. He's seen the good and the bad. Born into a wealthy family, attended the Milton Academy. Great things going for him. He's famous. But then again, the bad, the fire, the drugs, the divorces, the depression, many things that he wishes he could just redo. And then lonely times that I could not find a friend. He wishes he could just see Suzanne again. And then that leads us to the second verse, which is, won't you look upon me, Jesus, my body's aching. That one, that's important, so here it is. Won't you look down upon me, Jesus? You gotta help me make a stand. You just got to see me through another day. My body's aching and my time is at hand. So James Taylor realizes I got a problem. Like Suzanne's dying, the drugs, the divorces, in and out of the psychiatric centers. He goes to God and he says, "Help me stand strong. My body's even aching," which is directly correlates to his drug addiction. So then moving on, we have the chorus again, and then the third and final verse. It starts out continuing with more grief of his friend that died. And then here's another section with the controversy. It says, well, here it is. Sweet dreams and flying machines in pieces on the ground. So it says sweet dreams and flying machines in pieces on the ground. And that's actually his band that I mentioned earlier that broke apart, the Flying Machines. And it's not the plane that crashed for Suzanne. That did not happen. He confirmed that. And then one last thing I wanted to add about the song was, in the interview they asked about that line, and he says no, it wasn't about that, and he even wonders if her folks ever listened to this song and said, "Wow, was that about my daughter?" Because he never met them, and it's always something he wondered as well. Thank you. So now I'm going to talk about the more technical sides of the song, and I'm going to start out with the form. It's asymmetrical in rondo. It follows A, B, A, B, A, B, C. And then moving on, we have the rhythm, which in my perspective, it's uplifting and groovy, and those are the two best adjectives that I could come up with for it. And then for the melody, it's the vibe of the song, so it's mournful and grieving because of the loss of Suzanne, his talk about drugs, and if you know all the history, it all comes together. And then we have the harmony, and to me, the harmony is James Taylor's vocals. It's when he says like, whoa, and then the tino right here, like we have right here. Whoa, I've seen fire, I've seen rain, I've seen sunny days that... So the instruments are going, and then they're kind of higher pitched, and then You hear him go whoa, which is low, where that counter effect could offer up some melody. And then the key is major, and then the pitch is stretched out and doesn't really get high or low necessarily. It's more of like steady pitch. There's no ups or drops. And then lastly we have the timbre, which is, knowing the context, it's red, dark, gloomy, and unfocused. However, that's not what I really use it for. I use it for, well, when it's broken down it's a sad song and all, but I like to chill out to it and appreciate the instruments. The guitar and the drums are beautiful, and to me it's uplifting and not necessarily sad and a mourningful song. Thank you, and thank you for a great semester. I hope you enjoyed.